Hey you! Yeah, you, the one watching this video right now.
Oh, me?
Are you looking for a good cartoon to watch? Do you like Bob's Burgers?
Do you like musicals? No, sir.
Did you like the Bob's Burgers movie that is both Bob's Burgers and a musical?
Have we got a show for you?
Central Park is a show created by Bob's Burgers creator Lauren Bochard alongside fellow Bob's Burgers writer Nora Smith and Broadway and film actor Josh Gad. It's an animated comedy musical series that centers around the Tillerman family who live in the titular and very real Central Park in New York City. The father, Owen Tillerman, is the park manager. That's why they get to live in the park. The mother, Paige, is a newspaper reporter / journalist, and they have 2 kids. Molly, who's really into drawing superheroes, and Cole, who's really into animals and fantasy books about animals. They all live their own lives and deal with their own problems while also facing off against Bitsy Brandenham, a local heiress whose goal is to buy out all of Central Park so she can tear it down and put more city in its place for profit. The show takes on a mostly episodic format, with light serialized elements being sprinkled in from episode to episode, and its tone is very sincere, like Bob's Burgers before it. Mostly comedic, but serious when it needs to be, and the stories here are very character-driven. To that end, it helps that every character is relatable in some way, and they're all very entertaining to watch. So now, I'm going to spend the majority of the video talking about them because I don't know how else to sell you on this show.
Let's peek inside. It's not creepy. I'm the narrator.
The very first character we meet in the show is a busker named Birdie. He acts as the show's narrator, but he also doesn't act like any narrator I've ever seen. He sets up the stories for us so we can jump right into them, like your typical narrator does, but he's also a fully fleshed out character in the show's universe. He interacts with the Tillerman family very often, and the show makes a lot of jokes about how he's kinda stalking them. So you could say he's just a stalker telling us about the Tillermans, but he also often knows things that he probably shouldn't, like what's going on with Bitsy, or what certain characters are going to do in the future. It's a very non-conventional way to include a narrator in your story, but I like it. It gives the writing staff a lot of room to play around with an episode in a comedic way. There's one episode in season 1 where after Birdie reveals important information to Paige, they try to replace him with a new narrator. Who's they? I have no idea, but I think it's really funny watching these 2 buskers go head to head with each other while also still trying to explain the story.
Birdie takes this in as he walks away, defeated, with his funny little waddle and his mayonnaise-stained jacket. Stop narrating about me! Stop it!
Birdie is portrayed by series co-creator Josh Gad, and I'm slightly convinced that he's Josh Gad's self-insert, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It's not a creepy or egotistical self-insert, he's just a weird little guy who happens to also be the narrator. It's funny. It also helps that Josh Gad has Broadway experience, so he's able to give a really good performance for this type of show.
Huh? What are these, note cards with famous cliches on them?
What? No, I'm practicing a speech. I have to give a speech. Which one's a cliche?
The first member of the family is Owen Tillerman, the manager of Central Park. He's anxious as all hell, but still very passionate about his job and nature in general. Owen's central conflicts usually come from him trying to take good care of the park, or how he wants other people to feel the same way that he does about it. But in an era where less and less people are caring about the environment, both of those things are becoming more difficult to do over time. Not to mention how Bitsy's plans often get in the way of his work, but he still puts his all into it because of how much he cares. It's very endearing to watch him do everything he can for the park, and for his family, because, that's where they live. The park is their home, and he has to deal with so much while trying to protect it. One episode in season 2 sees Owen panicking because there's a large school field trip coming to the park soon, but the educational speaker they booked for it ended up canceling. Owen tells a story about this guy named Ward Whitlinger, who inspired Owen to become a park manager when he was younger. So, Paige decides to track Ward down so he can come talk to the kids during the field trip. But when Ward shows up, it turns out he no longer has any drive to care for the Earth because he lost funding for the nature center that he ran when Owen was a kid. Also, Ward is voiced by Keith David. I just wanted to mention that.
Find a place in your house where you can stockpile canned goods and jerky and medical supplies. That'll give you an edge when we have mass crop failures, which, honestly, will be happening sooner rather than later.
So when Ward gets on stage and starts talking to the kids about how everything is hopeless, Owen has to step up and overcome his anxiety so he can get the kids to care about nature instead. It's a great moment for Owen as a character to watch him inspiring a new generation of potential groundskeepers and park managers, and it's packed in with a great environmental message about how nature nature is worth protecting because of the beauty it brings to the world. Owen is portrayed by Leslie Odom Jr., who is most prominently known for playing Aaron Burr in Hamilton, but he has plenty of roles outside of that. He's a very talented man.
The Nobel Prize for Best Field Trip goes to Owen Sweet Cheeks Tillerman.
I mean, it's an honor just to be nominated. Not sure where the Sweet Cheeks nickname came from.
I'm a reporter, Owen. I report the facts.
Next we have the mother, Paige Hunter, and this is a really cool detail you might not notice while watching the show. Owen and Paige are married, but Paige actually kept her last name. They never refer to her as Paige Tillerman or Mrs. Tillerman. They always use her maiden name instead, and I think that's awesome because they didn't need to go out of their way to include such a small detail. It feels so much easier to just assume that Paige would take Owen's last name because that's what's considered standard for a marriage. But when you notice that Paige kept her maiden name, it immediately tells you so much about their relationship. You see that Paige was more comfortable not taking the Tillerman name and that Owen was supportive of that, and they tell us this without having to write a whole story or explanation about it. Instead, I'm the one writing a whole explanation about it. Anyway, Paige Hunter is a reporter for a small local newspaper called What's New New York, and her story begins with her boss letting her cover actual news for the first time. Like Owen, she's super dedicated to her job, but otherwise she's mostly the opposite. She's a lot more confident and extroverted than Owen is, which is something you kind of have to be if you want to be a successful journalist. Paige plays a slightly more active role in Central Park's ongoing story than the rest of the Hunter-Tillerman family, as she actively pursues the story that eventually leads to her finding out that Bitsy wants to buy out Central Park. It's hard for me to pick a specific episode that really captures her whole character, but the third episode gives us a good look at Paige putting her reporter skills to good use as she pursues a lead that she has on the park being defunded, and eventually she gets a quote from the mayor about the situation.
You told Leo to vote no. Why ruin the relationship between the Park League and the city?
We think we can do better. Sorry.
Paige is voiced by Katherine Hain, who also has Broadway experience, but significantly more experience in television. She isn't as experienced of a vocalist as some of the other cast members, but she plays the character extremely well, and the songwriters make excellent use of her range.
I'm thinking if I show up wherever he is on an easy breezy Saturday morning, start chatting, boom, I get a quote.
What's his name and how old is he?
Leo Schallenhammer, and he's about my age.
Facebook.
Next we have the kids, the older sister Molly and the younger brother Cole. Right off the bat, something I adore about the way these two characters are written is how you can see exactly what they get from both of their parents in the way that they behave. Molly is anxious like Owen, but she's also a creative like Paige. Meanwhile, Cole is more extroverted like Paige, but he has a deeper soft spot for nature like Owen. And now's as good a time to talk about it as any. The relationship this whole family has is very endearing. You'd think in a show like this, when you have two parents who are super dedicated to their jobs, you'd go the route of them struggling to prioritize between work and family. It's been done so many times, it feels like the easy way out at this point. But Owen and Paige are genuinely great parents who share interests with their kids and always try to meet them at their level when they have a problem. It's one of the ways that you can tell this show was created by the same people who made Bob's Burgers. And the kids are also great characters individually. Molly is intensely relatable, with her anxiety being a consistent point of conflict for her. She expresses herself through her art, but often hesitates to show it to anyone out of fear or embarrassment. But that art is also used to personify a lot of her inner thoughts, giving us some of the most visually distinct moments in the show. In fact, there's an episode in season 2 that is almost entirely this, where Molly is using her drawings to reflect on a day that she's personally ashamed of, and we see her arguing with herself over how she really feels about it through these drawings. It's a really creative way to depict anxiety. Cole is a character I have less to say about, but that's not a bad thing. He's the youngest in the family after all, he's just a kid, so they don't give him most of the more complex issues, instead opting to have him involved in stories that make more sense for someone his age. But there are threads that keep him consistent. You've got his attachment to Bitsy's dog Champagne, which is established in the first episode, and his love for a fantasy adventure book series about anthropomorphic squirrels. He's a child, but they don't use that as an excuse to avoid fleshing him out. Instead, he just feels like a real kid, which is awesome. Cole is portrayed by Titus Burgess, who is a very accomplished actor in both television and Broadway, and you can just hear how insane his vocal range is throughout the whole show. He might be the best singer in the entire cast. Molly, on the other hand, is the only character of the show to have had a change in voice actors. In season 1, Molly is portrayed by Kristen Bell, another actress with Broadway experience, but more importantly, Disney experience! Woo! But after season 1 ended, she willingly stepped down from the role in response to social movements calling for non-white characters to be played by voice actors matching their ethnicities. Season 2 onward, Molly is played by Emmy Raver Lampman, who is a fairly new actress from what I could find. Her IMDb page doesn't show anything predating 2016, and all the Broadway playbills I found have her listed as either an understudy or part of the ensemble or both. So what we have here is a fairly new actress getting to step in for someone as well known as Kristen Bell and play a major character in this show, which is really awesome. And if any of you were feeling sad at the absence of Kristen Bell in season 2, don't worry.
We've got to play this cool. We can't just blurt it out. We can keep a secret. Remember when I let you watch that R-rated movie and Cole got so nervous he called your mom?
Abby Hunter is a character introduced in the show's third and currently final season at the time that I'm writing this. If you didn't guess by the last name I just name-dropped, she's Paige's younger sister, and she moves to New York to pursue her dreams of becoming an actress. She's very patient and optimistic, and she assumes the best of everyone around her, but that optimism is put to the test when she takes a job at the Brandonham to help make ends meet. I have less to say about her because she's only present for the show's newest season right now, but I think her personality is really likable, and her arc in season 3 is very endearing. If we are going to get more Central Park in the future, she's definitely a character I'm looking forward to seeing more of. And like I mentioned earlier, she's played by Kristen Bell.
Oh, and some jalapeno poppers. Same table.
What? No, I will not sully my... Stop it. I'm the only one who gets to rant. You cook.
That leaves us with the villains. I saved the best characters for last. Bitsy Brandonham, the heiress to a fortune and the owner of the Brandonham Hotel, which sits across from Central Park. She's rich, selfish, entitled, and the third funniest character in the show. Think of villains like Doofenshmirtz from Phineas and Ferb, where they kind of tightrope on the line between being funny and menacing. Bitsy poses a genuine threat to Central Park because of her plans to buy up the land, but as a person on her own, she isn't very intimidating. There are small hints of humanity to her character. They mention a few times that she was very neglected as a child, and part of the reason she wants to buy out Central Park is so she can prove that she's worth something to her family. They give us reasons to sympathize with her here and there, but they don't let that overtake her role as a villain. She's still a terrible person, first and foremost. A huge part of what makes Bitsy so entertaining to me is the delivery by Stanley Tucci. He gives her this really condescending attitude that makes it sound like Bitsy is talking down to everyone all the time.
When they find out what I've got cooking, they're gonna line up at Bitsy's soup kitchen for a handout, and I'll say, "Get away from my soup, it's made for me."
For as funny as Bitsy is on her own though, what really makes her a delight to watch is the dynamic she has with her maid Helen, the second funniest character in the show. The first is a side character named Elwood.
Microwave.
Helen does pretty much everything for Bitsy. She answers her every beck and call, but the only reason she does that is because she wants Bitsy's money. Her plan is to suck up to Bitsy until she dies, with the idea in mind that she'll end up being the only person in Bitsy's will because nobody else can stand her. It makes for a great back and forth between the both of them. You have Bitsy being absurdly selfish and entitled, accompanied by Helen's realistic deadpan reactions.
We've got to get to the publisher right now.
But we've only gotten to your 30s. Wait, why am I fighting this? Yeah, sure, let's go.
And like Stanley Tucci before him, Daveed Diggs does a wonderful job selling Helen's exhaustion. Stanley Tucci and Daveed Diggs both have Broadway experience, Daveed Diggs being another prominent actor in Hamilton. The really cool thing about Daveed Diggs being in this show to me, though, is that he's also a really experienced rapper. Here's my top 5 clipping songs in no particular order. But what's incredible about this in relation to Central Park is that these showrunners absolutely recognize how talented of a rapper Daveed Diggs is because they have him playing the rapping character for the large majority of the show's music. That's great, because if you got someone like Daveed Diggs in your cast, you should absolutely take advantage of that talent. But it's also hilarious because it means that Helen is this old-ass white woman who will just bust out the hardest raps of all time out of nowhere. While I was watching the show, the music in general became something I would look forward to with every single episode. Yeah, remember when I said the show was a musical? I wasn't bluffing. And this isn't like Steven Universe or Tangled the series, where they sometimes have songs, or even Phineas and Ferb, which has a song in every episode. No. There are multiple songs in every single episode of the show. To be specific, one episode usually has 3 or 4 songs and sometimes a reprise, and the songs themselves range from 1 to 3.5 minutes in length. Now, when you have more than one song per episode, not all of them are going to be hits, but the large majority of them are. There's a lot of varieties in the genres that they go with. You can tell that they try to mix things up fairly frequently. You've got great comedy songs, great emotional songs, songs that exist solely to be absolute bangers. All the main characters have Broadway experience, and there are a lot of episodes where they bring in some really cool guest stars to sing. I already mentioned earlier that there's an episode with Keith David in it. Christopher Jackson shows up to sing in the second episode. Danny Bernstein, Gavin Creel, and Michael James Scott guest star in later episodes as well. There are songs on the show that are not performed, but written by They Might Be Giants and Michael freaking Bublé. And the animation during the songs is great as well. Season 1, I'll admit, less so than the others. But Season 2 onward, they really take advantage of the medium of animation and just start making full music videos for some of these songs, which just makes them that much more fun to watch. I can start listing songs to listen to that help you get a good impression of the show, but honestly, it's a delight getting to hear them all for the first time while watching it. So many of them tie into the episodes they're in extremely well, and I think it's better to experience them all with context. So with that said, where do you start with this show? The first episode. Obvious answer, I know, but in all seriousness, this show has a perfect pilot. It establishes the characters perfectly, it establishes the story and setting perfectly, and all of the songs in this episode are bangers. If you made it to the end of this video and this show sounds like it's up your alley, please give it a watch. It's currently exclusive to Apple TV+, and it makes me sad that such a good show is stuck on a service that basically nobody uses, because it deserves so much more attention and love, and a fourth season. I really hope we get a fourth season. But anyway, what do you think of Central Park? Have you watched it yet? Why aren't you watching it right now? Get out of here! If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and share it with your local theater kids.